We are learning the 16th letter of Iggeres HaKodesh, and I want to read a story. I'll do my best to summarize it, that I think is a good lead-in to help us understand the mission statement of this letter. This is a story that is told by Howard Schultz, who is the CEO and so forth of Starbucks. He's a Jewish guy, and he traveled to Israel. I think this is about 15 years ago. And he went on a tour with a bunch of other businessmen, and they came to Meir Sha'arim, and they were going to be introduced to a rabbi who was an older man. His name was Rabbi Finkel, and he was the head of a yeshiva. And they went there, and they waited about 15 minutes, and they finally were ushered into his study. Now, what they didn't know was that this Rabbi Finkel was severely afflicted with Parkinson's. And he sat down, and it was very just physically difficult to look at him because of his disfigurement and so on. So they're all looking away, and he bangs on the table, and he says, look at me right now. And his speech was worse than his physical shaking. It was very difficult to listen to him. So he says, I only have a few minutes because I know you're all very busy American businessmen. So as Howard Schultz commented, yeah, it was a little dig at them, like you people are too busy for me. So he asked them, who can tell me what the lesson of the Holocaust is? So he looks at one guy, and the guy didn't know what to say. And here were all these very high profile, very high powerful men, and they're like fifth graders who don't know the answer to the question. And they're all sort of hoping that he doesn't call on them. And he turns to another one, and the guy mumbles out some never forget kind of slogan. And he says, you don't get it. Let me tell you the essence of the human spirit. So this Rabbi Finkel says, as you know, during the Holocaust, the people were transported in the worst, most humane manner by rail car. They thought they were going to a work camp, but they were going to a death camp. After hours and hours in this inhumane corral with no light, no bathroom, cold, they arrived at the camps. The doors were swung open. They were blinded by the light. The men were separated from the women, the mothers from daughters, fathers from sons, and they went off to bunkers to go to sleep. As they went into the area to sleep, only one person was given a blanket for every six. The person who received the blanket when he went to bed, he had to decide, am I going to push the blanket to the other five who didn't get one? Am I going to pull it towards myself to stay warm? And Rabbi Finkel says it was during the defining moments that we learned the power of what it means to be a human being, because we pushed the blanket to five others. And he stood up and he said, take your blanket, take it to America, and push it to five others. This story received a lot of publicity. It's obviously a very dramatic story, a very emotional story. Howard Schultz tried to say that he follows this line and it models their Starbucks and so on. This letter is another letter about appeals for funds for the Kehillah Chabad. So just a brief history. In the mid-1700s, there was a big push to go to Eretz Yisrael. Things were not so great in Russia. And there was a group of people, including initially the Alter Rebbe, who were going to leave, and they were going to go to Israel. And the journey itself was extraordinarily difficult. I think they had middle seats, and they didn't get extra snacks. They would walk and take wagons, and it was incredibly difficult. And many people didn't even survive the journey. They arrived in Eretz Yisrael in the late 1700s, and they established a Chabad community, which is there to this very day. Rebbetzin Menucha Rachel, and there are families who are living in Eretz Yisrael to this very day from that initial Aliyah in the late 1700s. They established a fund called the Kehillah Chabad, which exists to this day, to support these people. And couriers would go back and forth to Russia and collect money and bring it to them and help them to establish just basic survival. And there was common and multiple appeals that were made. Just to take it to modern day, next time you're in Eretz Yisrael, if you're staring at the Kaisel and you look up to your left, you'll see the Kehillah Chabad office. They have a whole program dedicated to victims of terror, Chabad victims of terror, as we know. They are the ones who do the bar mitzvahs for war orphans and heat subsidies and clothing and so on and so forth. And just to add, we know that before a person goes to the oil and so on, they're supposed to give tzedakah. So who did the Rebbe give his tzedakah to before he went to the oil? Where did the Rebbe give tzedakah? And the answer is to Keil Chabad. And just to share an insight, so Rabbi Mendel Duchman, who runs the Keil Chabad today, he tells the story that the Rebbe was a very meticulous record keeper. So when the Rebbe gave tzedakah, he wanted a receipt. So they were like, I said Mendel, it's Yisrael Duchman. They were very like, how do you write a receipt? So they wrote, as we would in the title, Kvod Kedushas Admar, Shlita, and the receipt. And they sent it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe wrote back, I don't think the IRS will accept this receipt, addressed to Kvod Kedushas Admar. So this was a common theme. We've seen it before. And this particular letter appears to be addressed to a specific community, which, due to genuine financial hardship, had pulled back on their participation. And again, we know what life was like, a little bit about what life was like in the 1700s in Russia. It was certainly a time of great difficulty. So this letter acknowledges their genuinely difficult straits. So again, following the pattern that we have to empathize with the subject and recognize what they're going through. And still, after this empathy and sympathy, the Alter Rebbe begins to address and motivate them to continue their support of Keil Chabad. And the Alter Rebbe does address the halachic and spiritual urgency of their participation. And the Alter Rebbe is going to make reference to, I included it in the email, I hope everybody saw it, a halacha, which is somewhat of a disputed point, about chayecha koidmin. Is a person allowed to give away their last piece of bread to somebody else? Are they required to? Or are they prohibited from doing so, and they have to save their own life before saving somebody else's life? So we'll review that, as well as understanding what the parameters are. So here are a couple of general pointers that we'll talk about. Again, we're going to be visiting, and we'll see it hopefully in detail. It was in the email I sent on Friday about this rule that in Hebrew was called chayecha, your life, koidmin, comes before somebody else's life. And the basic summary of it is, the Gemara presents a situation where two people are walking in the wilderness, in the desert, and they're potentially dying of thirst. And there's one bottle of water. And the biological facts are that if one person drinks the water, he will survive. If they split the water, they'll both die. So the Gemara discusses, is it required to give the water away? Should we split the water? Or should the person who has the water drink it himself? And again, there are multiple opinions. One opinion is that they should split it, and whatever happens, happens. Another position is, no, his life comes before the other person, and since he happens to have the water, he's going to drink the water and survive, and the other person will not. But we'll see. So the Alter Rebbe is anticipating that this is what people are saying. And again, this isn't a sarcastic dig at the people who are suffering. They genuinely have need. But if the Alter Rebbe warns, if a person overly applies this rule, so they may wind up becoming the needy one themselves. This is not a threat. It's more of an attitude. There's a man who I used to know, interesting guy, and he grew up in literal poverty in rural Oregon, with dirt floors and so on. And his family was religious, and they would go to their 501c3 on Sunday. And one week, his mother comes back and she says, they're making a clothing drive for the poor. So go to your room and bring me some clothing to give to the poor. And this young man when he's 5-7 years old, he thought to himself, oh, I thought we were poor. I guess we're not poor. because we are collecting clothing to give to the poor. And he said this was one of the great life lessons that he learned. He later became a very wealthy and very charitable man. And he said that it's all in how we frame it. So when the Alter Rebbe says that if a person is overly meticulous in applying this law of considering his own life first, it's not just that there's some sort of comeuppance or this is some sort of threat. Rather, he is indicating that this becomes a mentality. And we all know people who don't have a lot of money, but they conduct themselves in a manner of wealth, and people who have a significant wealth, but they conduct themselves in a manner of poverty, and all the different forms thereafter. Even somebody who, for whatever even legitimate reason, closes off his heart, causes Hashem to react the same way, right? Even if they're fully justified. And again, another rule of thumb, like the Rambam describes in the 8 levels of tzedakah, that the highest level is to give even before being asked, not to wait to be solicited, but to give. And as we know, all tzedakah is a loan anyway. It is repaid by Hashem in this world as well as in the next. It is the rarest of mitzvahs where Hashem says, you can test me on this mitzvah. One who does not participate in a communal mitzvah is suspect of being antagonistic to the mitzvah and the significance of community and so forth. And again, the Alter Rebbe is going to make a particular appeal for the primacy of giving tzedakah in Eretz Yisrael. That even though, generally speaking, we say that tzedakah, the primary place of tzedakah is a person's place of residence, where they live. That's their obligation. There is an overriding rule of the tzedakah given to and in Eretz Yisrael. So here we go. You'll note in this letter, depending on the different prints that we have, in the small print it says Anshe. It has the letter Kuf, which stands for Kehila, L'chulu, to the men of this community. Now, it does not identify in this communal letter which exact community it's a reference to. However, the fact that it uses this unique titling in contrast to all the other letters that are simply to my beloved, to my friends, to my community, this seems to suggest that this particular letter was written to a specific particular community who was in a specific financial conundrum, as we call it. Ahuvai, my beloved, Achai, my brothers, Rei, my close neighbors, Asher Kenafshi, that are like my own soul. So the Alter Rebbe reaches out and he bonds and connects with them. And the first stage of this letter is the Alter Rebbe affirming and acknowledging the challenge that they are going through. Meaning, if he were to overlook that and say, well, everything's just dandy, it's warm here. Why do you mean you're cold? Or I have, what do you mean you don't have? Well, this is what I do. Why don't you do it? Which unfortunately, sometimes we could fall prey to that temptation. Just do it like I do it. What do you mean you don't speak French? I speak French. What do you mean you can't play the piano? I play the piano. What do you mean you can't run fast? I run fast. Everybody's got their struggles and challenges. So the first thing the Alter Rebbe does is he acknowledges and he validates, to use our sort of modern terminology, he validates their genuine concern. And within that, he gives them that encouragement. But he doesn't override and say, we stop it already with this complaining, which might be a tempting way to go, which sometimes it is. And we talked about this before, how the Alter Rebbe really empathizes with the community. You remember way back when he says, our experience suggests otherwise, when he is describing the application of the verse, behold, it is very near to you in your mouth and in your heart. And the Alter Rebbe says, our experience suggests otherwise. He doesn't just say, I heard some people don't like it, and so on. He includes himself. Loinella mimeni tzilkaitim. It is not hidden from me, the outcry or the squeezing or the desperation of the time. So the Alter Rebbe is acknowledging it. The Alter Rebbe is recognizing it. Asher, that nistaldala haparnasa, people's parnasa is shaky. Ubefrat hayuduyimli. and especially as I know, mi mech nechem, from your machane, from your camp, meaning from your community, from your circumstance, from your locale, asher mata yodam, belishu mishan umashana, that your hands are um, wobbly, without any place to rest, umamash leivin va'oichlin, to the point that you will literally are having to borrow in order to eat. So the Alter Rebbe fully acknowledges the difficulty and the struggles that they are going through. Hashem yerachim aleim. May Hashem have compassion upon them. V'yarchiv lahem, and should expand for them, bitzar, from their squeezing, bekiruv, and from their like being oppressed. V'im kol zeh, and in spite of all of this, acknowledge clearly, yes, I get it. Lo toiv heim oifsin lenafsham. It is not good what they are doing to their souls. Now, the Alter Rebbe here uses the phrase lo tov. Now, we know in general, we always try to default to the softest, kindest, least harsh manner of terminology. So lo tov is better than saying ra. I mean, there's a word for not good, and that's ra, bad. So we don't like using the word bad. It's very harsh. It's even judgmental. It's not so nice. So we don't like that. Okay, that's one aspect of it. That's one level. Perhaps, and I don't know that the Alter Rebbe intends this, but maybe if we can learn a lesson from it, it might be useful. There are 2 times in the Chumash where the phrase lo tov is used. One of them we just had, not yesterday, but last Shabbos, in Parshas Yisro, and the other is in Parshas Bereshis. Parshas Bereshis, right, really in the very beginning of the story, the Torah says, the Hashem speaks to us like as a narrator, and he says, lo tov, it is not good for man to be alone. And therefore, I will create Chava, and so on. So it says lo tov. The next time, and the only other time that it says this phrase, lo tov, it is not good, is when Yisro suggests to Moshe about establishing the tier system of judges. So Yisro is Moshe's father-in-law. He sees how Moshe is standing, as he describes it, from morning till evening, and the people are lined up around the block to seek his counsel or guidance. And Yisro says to him, "Loi toiv, it is not good that you do this." So what is the common factor between the it is not good for man to be alone, and it's not good for Moshe to judge? And again, the key word there, or the common word there, is alone. Isolation is not a Torah concept or value, although there is a purposeful application of isolation, hisbodedus, but that is not our general mean. And as we've talked about so many times, cooperation is a clear sign of godliness, that two work together. That's why the desert, where the sand does not share its nutrients with the vegetable, is what is sort of the personification of ungodliness, antagonistic to godliness, and so on, because again, it is not aligned with cooperation. So I don't know if this is what the Alter Rebbe intends. Maybe he's just trying to say it in a nicer way. But the lo tov part is because you're separating yourself from the community, the broader community in Eretz Yisrael, and from the local community in its efforts to be supportive of Eretz Yisrael. So again, I don't know that the Alter Rebbe intended this, but perhaps this is a somewhat of an insight. The usage of this phrase lo tov, or just ra, sometimes the Alter Rebbe is not shy to say it's a bad thing, ra be'enai, and so forth. But lo tov here perhaps is indicating this type of reprimand of isolation and separation. So here we go. Hey, moisim lenafsham, they're not doing good for themselves, for themselves. Lefiha nishma, as I have heard, And perhaps here again, the Alter Rebbe is allowing for, well, maybe I got a bad report, and maybe they're really actually doing it. It's the old story about the Rebbe who says to his chassid, "What's doing in that place?" So he says all these wonderful things, and the other guy said the truth, and this problem and that problem. So the Rebbe sort of half reprimanded the guy. The guy says, "Why you Rebbe? I'm telling you the truth." He says, "No, that's what you're hearing. Why are you hearing the negative? You should be only hearing the positive." So again, I'm not sure if this is what the Alter Rebbe is after, but perhaps it's a life lesson. I share that. Kofzu yodam. They have squeezed, they have pulled back, they have jumped back their hand. That's the phrase. Like koifetz means to jump. Hapsucha, that had been opened. Mi'oidam adayim mazeh, from way back when until now. So there's a certain pattern. And that pattern starts to become relied upon. Litain biyad malaya, to give with the full hand. Va'ayin yafa, and a good eye. A good eye doesn't just mean that you can see the difference of colors. It means a generous eye. And the Talmud talks about this. If somebody sells a farm, do they also include the farming implements and so on? Or are they sticklers? And we say when the person sells, they sell it generously. They're not harsh or rigid in their presentation. The chol had starches hachrechim lidai liyedei machsudei ha'avyonim nikiyim asher einehem nesuyes elenu. From all of the absolute necessities that they are giving to those who are deficient, they don't have, they're poor, and they are pure, and their eyes are lifted up to them. Now, this is based on a common biblical phrase that we don't just say they open their eyes, but they lift their eyes. Sometimes, again, it depends to whom one lifts their eyes. If they're lifting their eyes to somebody of virtue, that's considered to be a positive. If they're lifting their eyes to somebody who's negative, then that's like being intimidated or scared. So here the Alter Rebbe is borrowing this phrase to describe how their brethren in Eretz Yisrael have lifted their eyes to them. There was sort of an implicit deal that they were going to go to Eretz Yisrael, which, as we talked about, was a very arduous, physical, and dangerous activity to establish a Chabad community there. And the implicit deal was that their brethren back in Russia were going to help them and support them financially. It was a little bit of a deal. Like, there's a very sarcastic term. It's called alimony Judaism. I can't stand it personally, but I'll support it. I mean, it's kind of a nasty term, but there's a little bit of that quality going on here. And if we will not have compassion upon them, chas v'shalom, mi yerachem aleim, who will? V'chai achecha imcha, imach ksiv. And it tells us that the life of your brother is with you. So the Alter Rebbe here, and again, this is the format that students are accustomed to. You got to give them some halachic basis for their obligation. So he's established that we're talking about necessities. He's established that the people are pure and clean. They're not being wasteful. The money is being spent efficiently. There's a little bit of a remez, of a non-literal allusion, that when he says they're clean, it's like they're cleaned out. Like there's nothing. It's not like they don't want to touch their savings and so on, etc. They are literally tapped out, and they have no one else to turn to. And this halachic basis is this pasuk that your brother's life is with you and has to be treated the same. So now the Alter Rebbe anticipates a potential halachic pushback. And that's the story of the two people with the one bottle of water. See, even according to that opinion, because there are two opinions there. One is that they're obligated to split the water, and what happens, happens. It buys them a little more time, and who knows what Hashem will do. What does it mean? Certainly, I mean, When we say if one person drinks the water, he'll live and the other will die. And if they split it, they'll both die. I mean, we don't know that. That is the way that we operate. We operate under, generally speaking, medical guidance and so forth. But there is an opinion that they should split the water and we'll see what happens. But the halachic determination is that the person who has the water, his life comes first. Whether he's even permitted to give it to the other person is a separate discussion, but he's certainly not obligated to. So again, the Alter Rebbe anticipates that the benefactors who are being approached here are going to make this halachic argument. How can I support these people in Eretz Yisrael when I don't have myself? And if I do, it'll be coming out of my children's mouths. Yeah, you had a question?
Yes, Rabbi. Thank you. This Kolel Kabad was being established. I was a couple minutes late in the 1700s.
Yes, correct. And it goes on to this day. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Ella, when is that halacha applicable? Only kishbiyat echad kitin shamayim, when one person already has his one jug of water, and that's it. Shudavar ashav l'shneim. So you're talking about literally the same circumstance. And as we'll play it out here, that's not the circumstance that we're talking about, and it's only when it's literally the one drinks the water and lives, or the other drinks the water and lives. But that's the difference. Lishtois lahevshiv nasha b'tzama, to drink the water and settle their soul. Aval, but im ha'ani tzarech lechem lefi hataf ve'etzim v'ksus b'kara, he needs to feed his babies, and he needs wood and clothing to stay away from the cold. Called varim elu kodmin lechol mabushe kovid v'zevach mishpacha basa v'dogim v'chol metamim shala adam u'beisai. Then that person's basic essential staples takes precedence over the potential donors' wealth and fish and meat and beautiful clothing and so forth. And then this rule that, quote, his life would take precedence is not applicable. Because we're not talking about his literal life being at risk. That it should be considered two equal circumstances between him and the poor man. As it says in the Gemara, the name of the Gemara is called Nidorim, and it's on Daf Pei. So this is the piece that I sent in the email. I'll just read it quickly. I hope everybody read it already, as we do assign homework. It says here in the Gemara, with respect to a well belonging to townspeople, when it is a question of their own lives or the lives of strangers, so this is a limited water supply, the well is in a certain town, and this other town comes and says, we want water from your well. So if it's going to be that the populace, the citizens of the town where the well is, will drink it and live, or they'll give the water to these other outsiders and they'll live, and the local people will not, so their own lives take precedence. If it's not about the people living, but it's about the cattle, so their cattle, that is the people who own the well, their cattle will drink from it and live. Or they'll give away this water to the cattle of strangers, these outside people, and then the local people's cattle will die, and the outside people's cattle will live. Their cattle takes precedence over those of the strangers. What if it's not about water for feeding, for drinking for the people or for the livestock, but rather it's about laundry? So the people who live there, if they use the water to wash their clothing, they'll have clean clothing. And if the people from outside say, we want to wash our clothing, so then the people who own the well, they get to use the water to wash their clothing, and the outsiders will have dirty clothing. However, if it's between the local people washing their clothing or the outside people drinking it to save their lives. So now the needs are different. It's what we're describing here as a luxury in contrast to a necessity. So now the lives of the strangers take precedence over their laundry. So again, you can imagine this is an example, and whatever the circumstances are, in whatever the circumstances that play out. So the Alter Rebbe, again, he's anticipating the question that the prospective donor is being asked to give money, and he's saying, how can I give money? I need it for myself. So the Alter Rebbe is asking this person to consider, when you say you need it for yourself, what do you need for yourself versus what is it going to be useful for the other person? And again, this is that very difficult, challenging analysis and calculation that we have to make. What do we give up on? And this is one of the core points that the Alter Rebbe is trying to achieve here, which is not only that people should literally make the gifts and the donations, which of course is the ultimate illustration, but it's really about a change in attitude. What are we going to do with all of this money? It's the classic thing. Everybody wants more money. Not everybody, not us. We're perfect. I'm going to win the lottery. And what are we going to do with the lottery? So the Alter Rebbe is trying to change that basic human instinct that says, I get the lottery. I'm going to buy this car and that trip and so on and so forth. And say, I get it in order to do godly things with it, in order to direct it towards godliness. This is the sort of the mentality which the Alter Rebbe is trying to reconfigure and reshape. Now, again, maybe this is a more male competitive thing, but there's you'll never meet a rich person because you say to someone, are you rich? Oh, I'm not rich. But you have this. Yeah, but that guy has so much more. Just like you'll never meet a bad person. You say, are you bad? I'm not bad, but you did this. Oh, yeah, but that guy's worse. So as we know, in Torah, our goal is that on the one hand, when it comes to material things, we follow the dictum, who is wealthy? He who celebrates what he has. Everyone's familiar with this quote from Pirkei Avos. When it comes to spiritual matters, we follow the dictum of whoever has 100 should want 200. Again, what happens commonly in the world, not us, we're perfect. What happens is people always talk about how, I don't have enough of this and I don't have. And what about virtue? I'm virtuous enough. I do enough good things. I daven enough and so on. And we're trying to flip that on its head, that in spiritual matters, in the service of Hashem, we should be, quote, greedy. And in material matters, we should be satisfied with whatever we have. Okay, everyone's got the basic idea. So that's that Gemara, which again, it was in the email from the Dorim, where you got to make sure you're comparing, like we say, apples to apples. Are we comparing one person's necessities to another person's luxuries? Or are we comparing necessity to necessity? And this still is only if we follow after the rigid halachic sense. So two aspects going on here. First, the Alter Rebbe says, you have to truly consider what is your, I don't know if the word is analysis, but what is your, in Hebrew we say your cheshbon, what is your reckoning? Are you looking and saying that what I have for myself is absolute bare minimum, and therefore if I give it away, my life will be severely impacted in this manner, so then my life comes first? Or is it that I am foregoing an extra in order for them to have a little? A brief illustration. I once ran into. So one time I was here on a Friday and we were sort of cleaning up, and this family showed up and they had two boys. So I found a chocolate bar. So I said to one of the kids, you want the chocolate bar? So the kid says, sure. So his brother comes running, says, can I have one? I said, I'm sorry, there was only one. So he says, that's not fair. Why does he get one? So I said to this kid, I said, when you came here, how many chocolate bars were you expecting? He says, I wasn't expecting any. And how many are you getting? None. So what's the problem? You didn't expect to get any and you didn't get any. Yeah, but he got one. So meaning I was perfectly content to have none until I found out that he had one. And this is a common Yetzer Hara. It's a common Nefesh HaBahamis. This is what the snake said to Chava. You think you're happy, you know there's something you don't have. I didn't even know it was there. I didn't even know it existed, that I didn't even know that I wanted it. And now that I found out that I don't have it, I'm not happy. Now I'm miserable. 5 minutes ago, I didn't have it and I was perfectly content. Now I found out that it exists and I don't have it. Now I'm miserable. What happened? Because the Nefesh HaBahamis, the Yetzer Hara, wants that thing because he found out that someone else has it, even though he never knew about it and he didn't even want it. So here the Alter Rebbe says, let's make that Cheshbon HaNefesh. Let's do that true reckoning about what it is that we think we need and what is it that someone else needs, and so on. Now, again, this is certainly vulnerable to manipulation, but this is the Alter Rebbe here. And these are people who are following the Alter Rebbe. So they already trust the Alter Rebbe. I mean, this isn't just some guy who showed up and says, trust me. Trust me is not, if somebody has to tell you to trust them, you shouldn't trust them. But if you trust them, then you're reading this letter, then you're interested in what he has to say. That's a, yeah.
What's that phrase, chafesh b'nefesh? What did you didn't translate, I didn't know. Oops, you're frozen.
I'm not, what, I don't understand. What's the phrase? You're on mute here, I didn't understand.
Chafesh b'nefesh or something you just said. You just ran by.
The animal soul, the animal soul.
No.
Nefesh.
Oh.
That's what you're saying.
What's that?
The animal soul. I don't
The
know, I
animal
can't
soul, the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul.
Nefesh,
Nefesh
What's this?
HaBahamis. Animal
Haba,
soul, yeah.
Okay,
The
thank
animal
you.
soul. Okay. And now the Alter Rebbe says, even if in fact a person will make this reckoning and they will say, yes, if I give this away, it will literally take my life away. So, and therefore I'm not going to, or it's apples to apples. What they want is what I need it for. But then, even so, the Alter Rebbe says, this is only if we are, and I use this term extraordinarily sarcastically, very religious. All of a sudden, we become very religious. There's a half comical illustration. In two parshas in a row in Bereshis, we have someone who is described as the man. And they both turn out to be angels. One is Yaakov wrestles with the man, and he turns out to be the angel of Esav. Later, Yosef is going to find his brothers, and when he gets to where he thinks they are and they're not there, he encounters a man, and that man turns out to be an angel of God. So we ask the question, how do we know the first one is the angel of Esav, and the second one is the angel of Hashem? So the answer is, again, it's mildly humorous. The one who meets Yosef, he approaches Yosef and he helps him. What are you doing? I'm looking for my brothers. This is where they are. He helped him. That's an angel of Hashem. What's the angel of Esav? That he wrestles with him all night. And then Yaakov says to this man, this angel, give me a blessing. And what does the angel say? I have to daven. I can't, I have to go to daven. A whole night he's wrestling with him. He asked him for a favor. I have to daven. All of a sudden I'm very religious and I have to go and daven. So here the Alter Rebbe is recommending, and again, I use this term sarcastically, don't be so religious. Don't decide that all of a sudden I have to be so meticulous in it. And I'll push myself and I'll go outside the rules and I'll give this tzedakah, even though religiously I'm not obligated to do so. Even if it's a circumstance where this logic is not as applicable, a person should be particular and not be so religious. He should force himself, and he should go well beyond the law. And this double expression, lifnai v'lifnim, within and within. I mean, there's a parameter, there's a barrier. Jump the fence and go deeper and deeper and deeper to push himself to do even more than is required. V'lidoig la'atzmai mimayim razal, and he should think about this. Should call hamadakdek b'kach seif b'bodei kach chas v'shalom. But first of all, if he's so overly persnickety, then he winds up, like I told the story before, of falling into that mindset and thinking of himself as impoverished and becoming in that way impoverished. Not that his finances necessarily change, although that can happen too. That's a more spiritual concept. But even at the very human psychological concept, there is commonly going to be this type of adjustment, again, because he has changed his attitude and has made himself into a person who is, quote, needy, as we call it. V'gam, additionally, kukolanu tzurichim larachem eshamayim b'chol eis b'serusa delasata dafka b'chol eis v'chol shah lo yerachmim al hatzrichim larachmim. Everybody ultimately needs this type of rachmanis, this idea. Like we talk about, there is tefillah la'ani and tefillah la'ashir. There's the prayer of the poor man and the prayer of the wealthy man. But ultimately, everybody is in need of Hashem. Even if I say, well, what do I need? I don't need money, right? But maybe I need kindness. Maybe I need assistance. Maybe I need support. Maybe I need friendship. Need is not a weakness. Need is built into society so that there is community. Again, it is not good for man to be alone. Aloneness is not a value. It's not an aspiration. So a person may not need money, but they need other forms of kindness, other forms of tzedakah. They need someone to teach them. They need someone to teach their child. They need sympathy, empathy, a welcoming ear, whatever it is. This is the character of societal development. So one way is to give money. And anybody who squeezes their heart and smothers their godly impulse of kindness, of compassion, really, for whatever reason it is, perfectly legitimate explanation. So as we know, Hashem responds in kind. Hashem acts to us as we act to others. So again, it's not designed, it sounds like a threat, but it's not designed to be a threat. We create that certain type of energy around ourselves. If we are miserly financially, we create people to be miserly with us emotionally, in friendship, in kindness, and so on. And it's always going to be a very subtle thing, because we create a certain energy around us that is reflected back to us. And look, we have a rule of thumb. There's no person in the world, as righteous as he may be, who's never in need, who's never failed. This is a rule of thumb. As we say, nobody's perfect. Does God expect us to be perfect? Yes, he does, but nobody does. Nobody makes it through without a deficiency here or there. If so, we all need a little rachmanis. You know, it's a classic thing. If the person is 5 minutes late to pick me up, I'm all annoyed. If I'm 5 minutes late, I expect them to be patient and tolerant. If we give off this characteristic of harsh rigidity, so we create an environment of harsh rigidity. Hopefully not, but if anyone's ever been in a work environment like that, where everything is about gotcha and everything is about correcting them, one person does that way, and it creates an environment of rigidity. It creates an environment of competitiveness to the point of leading me to crush the other in order to, quote, be successful. As such, we need to create a different kind of environment. There's a saying, a chassid creates a sviva, an atmosphere. Now, what this means is something very subtle. And we're talking about, again, socially, even in a company, and so on. It's all about creating a healthy and divine culture around it. We do it in families, we do it ourselves. It's something that's very difficult to pinpoint. How do you do that? Why can't I do that? But we've all had this experience. You go to certain businesses and it's pleasant and cooperative and you want to go there, and you go to other places and it's nasty and rigid and so on. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. The way we behave creates the environment around us. And this is the healing of the body and the soul. This is how they become what's the word I'm looking for? They become healed. Asher or ba'ad or b'chol asher li'ish yitem ba'ad nafshay. Just like every person would give themselves for their whole life, there's nothing they would hold back. B'shagam anu maminim b'nei maminim, and we are intuitively believers, the sons of believers. What is believers, the sons of believers? It means it is embedded within our nature, just like an acorn tree produces more acorns that produce acorn trees and not redwood trees. And a cow begets a cow. It doesn't beget a duck. So too, our avos begat avos, told us children who reflect their avos. And the reflection of the avos is that they're absolute maminim. Now, of course, the word maminim we translate as belief, but remember, as we've talked about in other contexts, that word belief is sometimes a little shallow. I believe that there's a planet called Saturn. Okay, I believe you. Or I believe it's going to rain tomorrow. But it's not really meaningful in my life. The word maminim really means, again, from that word for a skilled craftsman, amuna. It is something that is really, truly developed within me. So the Alter Rebbe is telling us that it is not unnatural for us to do this. Now, again, we've probably all met somebody who giving, whether it's money or it's time or it's friendship, is completely foreign to them. They have no idea what you're talking about. Why would I give somebody else? Why should I help that person? Oh, well, if I help them, then they'll help me. It's totally outside of their awareness. They see somebody drop something, they don't say, no, it's not my business. Or they see somebody going the wrong way, they don't say anything, it's not my business. It's not like even that they're consciously being cruel or taking pleasure in watching somebody else suffer. It's just completely outside of their mindset that they should do anything for somebody outside of themselves. They don't think about it. Again, they're not antagonistic to it. It's just completely outside of their thought processes. Okay. Look, ultimately, tzedakah is a loan to Hashem. So you're giving a loan to Hashem. So you're going to get it back anyway. I know two stories of people who gave loans to somebody, and the lender got swindled. So when the borrower came to repay him the loan, he says, wow, it's so glad I lent you the money, because if I would have had that money in my account, I would have gotten swindled out of it. But fortunately, I didn't have it there. So again, these are the examples where the loan is paid back. Hashem brings it back anyway. So the Alter Rebbe said, we should think about the future. We wouldn't need help. We think about the present. We all have our flaws that need to be corrected. And we think about the idea of tzedakah as a corrective for the past. And again, it creates a certain, I know this is a hokey word, but it's probably appropriate, a certain aura about the person. They become a giving person. They create a giving community. They create a giving energy around themselves, not only about writing the check, which is one level, but about being forthcoming with friendship, with empathy, with sympathy, with kindness, with instruction, with suggestion, and so forth. They simply express themselves in a manner of giving and not a manner of taking. Because again, ultimately, in every moment, there's giving and taking. So the Alter Rebbe is recommending this idea even when it's very challenging and so forth. And again, just like a person would give whatever he could to save his life, everyone knows that joke, your money, your life, I'm thinking about it. But unfortunately, in today's society, that is not uncommon. we're thinking about it. And again, to enliven his soul with this characteristic of Kedusha. How do we see that everything is alone? Because like it says, Milva Hashem Cheinin Dal V'Gmula Yishal Malay B'Kaflayim by the Mazeh. It is alone to Hashem, the kindness to the poor, and a gift that He will pay back in double in this world. The schar kol mitzvahs lekabaylam hazeh. Generally speaking, as we often experience, there is not reward for mitzvahs in this world. That is, there isn't always human reward for doing a mitzvah. This person keeps Shabbos and he doesn't seem to have, quote unquote, better than the person who doesn't. This person eats matzah, we don't see the reward. It's a spiritual transformation, except for tzedakah. In tzedakah, there is this reward. And again, not just the financial, it creates this energy of being giving. Lefi shu toiv lebriyos, because it is beneficial to people. Kedisa b'kedushin seif parakama, like it says in the end of the first chapter of the volume of Talmud called Kedushin. V'gam yesh lachash lo'enes chas v'shalom. And then the Alter Rebbe ends with a little bit of tough love. He says a person has to be cautious about penalty. And this is a reference to, which we'll read here, a Gemara in Brachas. That's the name of the volume. It's called Brachas. It happens to be the first volume of the Talmud. And it's page 26a. And the Gemara asks a question. It does a question answer in the following. I'll read you the full text of the Gemara, and then we'll see here. They asked the question, what is considered a sin for which a person cannot correct it, and a diminishment that a person cannot fix? So then the Gemara answers, a sin that a person cannot correct is, for example, a person misses a time-oriented mitzvah, such as reciting the Shema in the evening, reciting the Shema in the morning, or prayer in the evening, or prayer in the morning. Because that's it, it's gone. Yesterday's opportunity is gone. So again, this is a time-oriented mitzvah, but it's true in other concepts as well. Yesterday's opportunity is gone. I don't have yesterday's opportunity. Then it says, what is considered a deficiency that cannot be uplifted? This is when his friends, all, or his community, all gathers to do a mitzvah, and he does not participate with them. That's it, it's gone. Rabbi Friedman talks about, Mashiach will come. Don't I want to be there and say, I was part of this, I participated in this? Or it's like the family picnic. Everybody's bringing potato salad. If I don't bring anything, don't I feel left out? So it's right, it's too late now. Everyone got together and signed the birthday card, and I didn't sign the birthday card. And now they gave the birthday present, and he's reading all the people, and I'm not mentioned because I didn't participate. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. You don't want to be that guy who in the look back says, "Oh, I didn't participate in that." So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. That his friends, this is that quote that we just read, that his friends participated in a mitzvah that's happening or has happened, and he didn't participate. And again, in this letter, which is addressed to this community, that's not joining along with the other communities. You don't want to be that guy who's left out. You don't want to be on that list. Hashem should bring to you blessings of good and all manners of good. That God does good for the good. The Yesharim in the straight. Kenafsham v'nefesh hadeidah shloima mikol lev v'nefesh. To your souls, I who seek the good of your soul. Ultimately, it comes down to trusting. You're trusting the Alter Rebbe that he's suggesting this for you because it's good for you. And again, the Alter Rebbe has built up this trust. So if somebody tells you to trust them, don't trust them. But if you know that you trust the person and he is sharing this advice with you, then it's worth following and worth trusting. So again, the Alter Rebbe is making this point that we change our attitude, and therefore we don't become on the needy list. We don't want to close off our relationship with Hashem. Don't be so religious, so rigid, be a little bit more flexible. Tzedakah is a loan anyway, and Hashem is going to prepay you. And you don't want to be the guy who's not counted in the communal mitzvahs and being suspect of being antagonistic to the mitzvah, as if you don't think this is a good mitzvah to do. And again, these are your brethren who relied on you. That was sort of the implicit deal, that they would do the physical hard labor of traveling to Eretz Yisrael, and it was a tough time. And the sort of deal was that they could rely on your support. All right, we'll stop here.